Good evening. My name is Bill Johnson, and I'm the publisher of the Palo Alto Weekly and president of Embarcadero Media. Tonight's forum is sponsored by Embarcadero Media and Youth Community Service, and is the third town hall focused on the issue of racial justice that we've held since the death of George Floyd. On June 25th, we hosted a panel entitled Race, Policing, and the Color of Justice, which featured local police chiefs and community activists.
Good evening. My name is Bill Johnson.
And on July 1st, in a forum called Black Food Matters, Race and Local Food Entrepreneurs, 3 Black owners of food-oriented businesses discussed the challenges they face in the midst of these difficult times. Both of these forums are available for viewing on the Palo Alto Online YouTube channel, as will tonight's discussion. We have a large audience tonight, but we invite your participation. If you would like to submit a question or comment, you can either submit it at any time using the Q&A function, or use the raise your hand option beginning at about 7:30, when we will begin taking questions, and we'll ask you to unmute your audio, or we will unmute your audio when we are about to call on you. To get us started, it's my pleasure to introduce Maura Oman, who is the new Executive Director of Youth Community Service, better known in the community as YCS. YCS is a highly respected, almost 30-year-old nonprofit, which through a variety of programs brings youth of diverse backgrounds together for community service and leadership development. Maura?
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for creating this opportunity for all of us to come together as a community to engage in dialogue, especially during these challenging times. I'm so grateful for your leadership to sustain local journalism as well. My name is Maura Oman, and I'm the Executive Director of the nonprofit organization Youth Community Service, YCS. I'm honored to follow my incredible predecessor, Leif Erikson, who led YCS with heart and perseverance for 16 years. Thank you, Leif. Youth Community Service, as Bill mentioned, has served the Bay Area Mid-Peninsula region for over 30 years with the mission to bridge the gap in our communities through service, leadership development, and enrichment initiatives. To learn more about participating in our programs and supporting our mission, please visit us on the web at youthcommunityservice.org. It is my great honor to introduce today's moderator, Julie Lythcott-Haimes. Exactly 2 months ago on June 6th, Julie spoke at the youth-organized Black Lives Matter event here in Palo Alto. She shared these words that inspired tonight's event. You are leading us out of our ignorance, out of our apathy toward being the people we aim to be. Generation Z, you inspire us. Thank you, Julie, for capturing the sentiment of so many of us listening tonight. Julie Lythcott-Haimes believes in humans and is deeply interested in what gets in our way. She is the New York Times bestselling author of the Anti-Helicopter Parenting Manifesto, How to Raise an Adult. Her TED Talk on the subject was one of the top talks of 2016. And in 2020, she became a regular contributor with CBS This Morning on parenting. Her second book is the critically acclaimed and award-winning prose poetry memoir, Real American, which illustrates her experience as a Black and biracial person in white spaces. A third book, Your Turn, How to Be an Adult, will be out in April 2021. Julie is a former corporate lawyer and Stanford dean, and she holds a BA from Stanford, a JD from Harvard, and an MFA in writing from California College of the Arts. She serves on boards of Foundation for a College Education, Global Citizen Year, and Common Sense Media, and on the advisory board of leanin.org. She volunteers with the hospital program, No One Dies Alone. She lives in the San Francisco Bay Area with her partner of over 30 years, their young adults, and her mother. Thank you, Julie. The floor is yours.
Maura, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this wonderful forum that YCS is putting on in conjunction with the Palo Alto Weekly. thank you, Bill, for your leadership in our community. It feels very special that we're not just having this conversation, but that these two foundational organizations, the local paper and YCS, which has been around for 30 years, is sponsoring this. This tells me that our community has decided to invest in what we can learn as older people from the youth who live among us. So I'm really honored to get to be here. I can't hear youth community service without thinking of my dear friend, Megan Sweezy Fogarty, one of the founders of the organization. This is an organization I've admired for close to 30 years myself. So thank you, Maura. Thank you, Bill. Thank you to your organizations. Thank you to the close to 200 participants, but y'all, we seem to be at 216 people right now, which is phenomenal. Don't be nervous, panelists, but we have a lot of people watching. We're going to try to make good use of everyone's time tonight. Seriously, thank you for deciding to spend your Thursday evening with us. I know you're excited to dive in. And of course, a final thanks to our panelists, Makayla Miller, Hele'ine Grewe, Divya Ganesan, Cleo Goodwin, and Ayinde Olukotun. Ayinde couldn't join us tonight because he's had an emergency come up in the life of one of his friends who lives in Beirut, who has experienced some real tragedy there, and he's chosen to support that friend instead of being here with us tonight, and we told him we understood completely. All right, so here's how things are going to work. We are going to spend about 90 minutes together. 11 of those minutes have already expired. We're going to try to manage our time well, so we have about 35 or 40 minutes of your questions toward the end. And it was lovely to me when one of the young people said, "What do we call you? You know, do we call you Ms. Lythcott-Haimes?" I said, "No, call me Julie." The young people will be on first name basis with me, which is 100% fine and appropriate with me as far as I'm concerned. But I wanted to make that point because I know there are some older members in the audience who might think that young people calling a 52-year-old by her first name is not appropriate. And I want you to know they asked permission and I gave it. Okay. I have a few thoughts on Gen Z that I'm just going to summarize quickly because as Maura pointed out at the rally, that a number of our youth organized in Palo Alto in June, I said something to the effect of how inspired I was by this generation. Whatever you know about Generation Z, you know they are than the rest of us. And wow, are they different in ways that I find fascinating and inspiring. Here are a few differences, and I'm offering you these things because I think they may have something to do with why young people in Gen Z are really taking the mantle of leadership today in light of what's going on in our nation and in our world. Here are some of my observations. First of all, Generation Z in this country, and by Generation Z, we mean people basically born after 2000, maybe after 1999, maybe after 2001. You know, generational lines are not perfect and clear, but roughly born since the turn of the new millennium. And here's what we know about them. In the United States, at least, they're the most diverse generation America has ever seen. And we in California are leading the way with regard to racial and ethnic diversity. Most diverse generation by far. This is the generation that makes us majority minority, if you will, majority people of color in this state, and will help turn America majority people of color in the middle of this current century. That's Gen Z. Also, they've all been taught social and emotional learning in schools. I'm Gen X, nobody taught me that stuff, right? But Gen Z, for the most part, has had access to this curriculum in elementary school, in middle school, in high school. They have been taught that everybody matters, that every voice counts, not to make assumptions about people on the basis of identity and background. They have learned to value differences. And that's a pretty unique attribute of this generation. Those are some positives. Here are some negatives associated with how they've been raised. This is the first generation to have active shooter drills in their classrooms starting in kindergarten. Because as those of us who are older know, the Columbine shooting, which horrified us all in 1999, did not change us as Americans, did not lead to gun control. And as such, we've raised our children. We've decided it's okay to raise children with the looming threat of gun violence in their elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. That's something Gen Z is the first generation to experience. In addition, the climate in ways that are becoming increasingly terrifying. This generation has grown up with that knowledge, knowing that their lives, if they are to lead lives, must attend to the threat of climate change. And I think that existential threat is facing this generation unlike any other. And then finally, what I think we all probably assume and know, their technological and social media savvy is off the chain. They know this stuff innately, they get it. And so if they want to across the world, they know how, and they can do it like that. And so when they're activated, when they're angry, when they're upset, when they're passionate, they know what to do to make something happen. So those are 5 characteristics that I've noticed that I think really help contribute to an understanding of why this generation just seems so different. And I would add, so wonderful, so much more wonderful than the rest of us. Okay, so I'm gonna stop talking. I'm gonna ask each one of these wonderful young people to introduce themselves, and then I'm gonna ask them a few questions, and then we're gonna get to your questions. The last thing that I'm gonna say is I think we're trying to accomplish 3 things tonight. The first is we listen to these amazing young activists. We wanna listen to what they say about their activism, about their leadership. That's number 1. Number 2, we wanna hold space for them to be vulnerable, because in their activism, in their leadership, around these issues of racial injustice, around racialized terror, around whatever the issues are that they're passionate about, there can be some personal stuff that comes up. There can be heartache, there can be sadness, there can be fear, and we wanna try to hold space for them to show up as they fully are as human beings. So hoping this space feels safe for them in which to have these conversations. And number 2, we hope you all, our audience, will walk away with a few concrete ideas about what you can do if you're ready to join these young people who are leading the way right now. So those are, I think, our 3 goals for the evening. Without further ado, I want to now be quiet and ask our young panelists to introduce themselves. So take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Makayla Miller. I want to say thank you, first of all, to Julie and Maura and Bill for getting us together and doing all this. And thank you to everybody that's participated and is here tonight listening. I'm 18 years old. I just graduated from Palo Alto High School. I'm currently a freshman at Louisiana State University. I'm currently working with Boys and Girls Club in East Palo Alto, and I've been working with the Big Homie Project, which gets mentors for Black students in their occupation of interest and gets them together to create that connection and build that. And then I've also helped lead marches in both Palo Alto and Menlo Park, one of those with Cleo Goodwin. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Divya Ganesan and I've grown up in Palo Alto and Menlo Park, and I'm a rising senior at Castilleja School. I'm really passionate about facilitating conversations that are uncomfortable, especially between people with different political perspectives, and I've tried to tackle this a couple of different ways. First, I co-founded a nonprofit called Real Talk that strives to engage youth in political engagement and discourse. And at the local level this year, I served as president of the Palo Alto Youth Council, the liaison group between teens and city council, to work on engaging teens through voter registration drives and debate watch parties. And lastly, most recently, I've been really inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement and the amazing work that both Hele'ine, Makayla, and Cleo are doing to organize movements to take action in my local South Asian community, creating discussions with seniors about anti-Blackness. I'm really excited to be on this panel today. I want to say again, thank you to Maura, Bill, and Julie for this opportunity.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Hele'ine Grewe. I hope everyone is doing well and doing awesome during these challenging times. Many call me Ine for short. You guys can you all can know me as Ine. A little bit of about myself is that I'm from a small town of East Palo Alto. I went to school through the Ravenswood City School District at Castaño and 49ers Academy. Throughout my high school years, I was able to experience different programs in schooling, not starting traditional school until my junior year. And so During that time I had during my freshman and sophomore year, I focused entirely on social and environmental justice. I started my journey through a small grassroots organization in East Palo Alto known as YUCA, Youth United for Community Action. I am thankful for those gems of knowledge that I've learned from YUCA. There's where I learned my awesome campaign planning / organizing and learned about the injustice that I was blind to every day in my community and the world. From housing discrimination to the school to prison pipeline, somehow I got my school to give me a period where I can be at UCA, and then I was at UCA more than I was at school. So some campaigns I worked on during those times were immigration. How can we help the undocumented community, whether they're Pacific Islander, African, Hispanic, how can we help that undocumented community? And then tying that into the housing and education sector, and many more campaigns I would like to touch on later. Some environmental campaigns that I worked on also is East Palo Alto's water allocation. We have one of the lowest water allocations than our neighboring cities. And we're also under sea level rise, and how will we respond to that? How will we be prepared or protected? Today, I've been working closely with Anamatangi Polynesian Voices, One East Palo Alto around the 2020 census, which led into an awesome innovative program called Project Count, led by Reverend Tiara McNair, which has allowed me to be a mentor to 10 youth like me, and also be a mentee to a community star, Miss Bobby Arnold. And tomorrow is actually our last day, and it's been nice to talk to the youth around the community about the census, and even more importantly about the justice towards Black people that people have been blind to and even silent about. And to end this long introduction, I am very happy and excited to be here. Thank you, Maura and Bill and Anamatangi, for supporting me and preparing for this. And I'm just hoping to learn from all of you, and I hope you all can learn something from me. And thank you, Julie, for being an awesome person.
Cleo, it is your turn to introduce yourself. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. My name is Cleo Goodwin. I am 20 years old. Lived in Palo Alto basically my whole life. Graduated from Gunn High School in 2018. I just finished 2 years at De Anza, and due to coronavirus, I will be taking a gap year before I transfer to North Carolina Central as a communications major in hopes to be a lawyer. Me personally, I do not belong to any program or organization within the community. Growing up, it was always important for my family to be vocal on social justice issues all around, especially in the Black community. So that started in middle school for me. When Trayvon Martin died, that's when I kind of understood what was happening with the Black community, and that's when I became vocal. And then as incidents occurred, and I guess as my maturity level grew, and going to Gunn High School, where Black students are at a minimum, that's where I began to use my voice and various social media platforms to speak on issues that really matter to me. So yeah.
Cool. Cleo, thank you so much for that. Thank you, Ine, Makayla, and Divya as well. I want everyone to know that Cleo joined us a little bit late because she was working tonight and her shift didn't end till 7. So she got here as soon as she could. We appreciate your making the time for us, Cleo. We know you're busy. I know all of you are busy. My goodness, listening to your introductions, I'm sure everyone older than you is like, they have so much energy. Look at how involved you are. Your list of various organizations and ideas and issues that you're passionate about is long, and it's impressive. And that's just one aspect of why we're kind of in awe of what y'all are doing. So let's now get into how you got from being a kid in East Palo Alto or Palo Alto who is now an activist. My theory is that at some point for each of us, if we choose the activist path, and I have a little bit of a connection to this myself with things I've done over the years, there's something that stirs in your body. There's something in your body that you can feel that makes you go, I am not okay with this. Something is wrong. I need to do something. I need to act. There's something that activates you to get out of your regular scheduled life and into this place of doing something about whatever the cause that's stirring you might be. I'm wondering if, as I say this, that resonates at all. If not, discard what I've said and just ask yourself, what was it that made me, like Cleo has already said, Trayvon Martin was killed. That was 2012. That's when Cleo knew, I gotta do something about this. See if the rest of you can share with us, and Cleo, feel free to expand upon what you've said. What does it feel like? Because I want audience members who are hungering to get more involved and figure out where they want to get involved. I want them to know what to look for as the evidence in their own minds, their own body, their own heart, spirit, wherever you think it's housed. I want them to have a sense of what it feels like and where it's located. So I'm just going to throw that out. And this format, as the panelists know, is just meant to be a conversation. So just jump in with your own thought, okay?
Yeah, so I'll share first. I grew up in East Palo Alto, going to school in Palo Alto. I went to Pali, and going to school as Cleo was saying, and being a minority student, not very many Black kids go there. Once I became president of Black Scholars United, I felt like I wasn't doing enough for my group, my people. I felt like we were kind of left in the corner, and it was just us, and we were kind of doing things for ourselves, and I felt like I needed to do more, but I didn't know what that was. And then once quarantine started and all of the shootings started happening these past few months, I was sitting back and watching, and I felt helpless, and I felt like I felt like as a youth person, as a child, there was nothing that I could do. But I started seeing people on media, people like me, young like me, doing things, and I realized that I do have a voice and I can make change. And so that's why I started getting involved in taking the opportunity to go out and do things as safely as I possibly could.
Anyone else going to share on what?
Yeah, can you just repeat your question real quick?
Yeah, I just want to know kind of what got you into this role of I'm an activist. Can you recall what it felt like when you decided? Because I guess the point is not everybody's an activist, not everybody's a leader, not everybody is so concerned about a topic that they decide to really devote hours of their time and their effort and their sweat and their emotional life to the cause, but you have. So what do you think? Can you recall a moment when that kind of, you were like, okay, this is what I need to do? Or maybe it wasn't a moment. Maybe that's not how it worked at all for you.
Yes, I feel like I started because specifically my mom and my family has been very transparent with me growing up. A lot of people try to guard their children from the world and try to make it sweet to them. But my mom and my family was very transparent with me, like this is the world. And growing up in East Palo Alto, you know, this is where we live. And I feel like that prepared me to know, in order to survive in this world, this is what I need to do. I need to know, especially going to school is where I was exposed to it first. I need to know that this education is not the best education I can get. And I get this education because I'm a Black person, a Polynesian person in East Palo Alto, and this is why my education is so bad. And so I feel like as a young person, my freshman year going into high school, I was so happy about going into school, and that was crushed by you know, new experimentation going on in East Palo Alto because it's kids of color. And I feel like that's where I really started to know what injustices were around the world and what systemic racism really is. And going into UCA is when I found out about, you know, the housing discrimination, how East Palo went from 70% white to 70% Black, and now it's back. The Black population is not, there's not a big population here anymore. And nobody wants to talk about that, but we want to know why. Why is there not a big Black population anymore? And knowing about East Palo being the murder capital, knowing about police brutality around the community, I felt like my parents did a good job educating me on that and allowing me to be an activist and speak up for things that are very uncomfortable to speak about, because people, especially the youth, need to be taught about the things that they will run into in the future in order for us to survive and change these ways of living.
You know, Ine, I feel like I have an almost opposing experience in that I think a lot of my activism came from moments of feeling as if I've been living in a bubble and that bubble needs to somehow break. And Julie, I know you mentioned like a specific moment, and I think the closest thing I have to that is probably right after the 2016 elections as an 8th grader, coming to school and realizing, I think it's like a feeling of blindsidedness and that there's a lot I don't know. And more, I guess importantly, I feel like I've been living in a bubble, possibly with the privilege of going to a private school, of going to a school where a lot of people share my similar political beliefs, where I haven't been exposed to not only political perspectives from across the country, but even experiences that are not within my own community, Palo Alto specifically. And having that realization made me realize that, one, I need to get more involved in my local community. And I think that was really what motivated me to join the Palo Alto Youth Council. And I think even within that, there are ways you can criticize like the ways in which Palo Alto and East Palo Alto are inherently not connected and why that's a problem. And then second, to figure out how can I put myself in situations where I'm going to be exposed to perspectives and backgrounds that are going to be different than mine, and create and have the uncomfortable conversations that I feel like I lacked as at least a middle schooler, that allowed me to feel so blindsided after this. And since then, I've tried to figure out through panels like this, through engaging in the community, how can we continue to create dialogues like this that allow us to share perspectives and gain a better understanding. I think that's really how progress is made.
Cleo, I want to make room for you to jump in here and answer this if you feel like.
For me, the moment for me, surprisingly, was at a very young age. So I was 9 years old when when Oscar Grant died. And I remember seeing the Black community in so much anger and so much frustration. And just like Hele'ine, my parents were very transparent with me on the various issues that the Black community faces. And it wasn't so much of you have to play the victim per se, but it was you are a Black woman in America, and these are the various things that may or may not happen. And I remember I was in the living room and there was just a lot of anger, and the Oakland riots were happening. And at that moment, I knew and I began to understand what they were talking about. Like, this could maybe or may not be me one day. And I have 4 older brothers. And so seeing a man who looks like my brothers on TV dying at the hands of people who are supposed to protect us and serve the community, that's when I started to question a lot of things. And that's when I knew that if I want to live in a world where I feel comfortable, the only thing that I could do is try and change how things are. And so, again, that motivated me all throughout middle school, being the few Black kids there was constantly the racial jokes. I went to JLS Middle School. The mascot was the Black Panther, so there was those type of jokes, and that's when I realized, like, okay, there are people who don't look like me who see me differently because of my skin color, and that's not okay. And I didn't understand that racism was still continuing in America, um, like it was, because for me, Jim Crow era, slavery, oh, that's in the past. So that, I guess, just traveled on through high school.
Thank you for sharing, all of you. For many of us, we learn young, as Cleo has just shared, that something might be wrong with us in the eyes of others on the basis of our skin color. And as Cleo and who else shared about mom? My mom has been transparent. Ine said that, right? Right. Our parents pull us aside and make sure we are equipped with the knowledge we need to have in order to be smart and safe out in the world, a world that becomes increasingly bewildering in its unfairness and lack of justice. And some of us are raised in a bubble, as Divya shared, didn't realize. And then all of a sudden, kind of the veil was removed with the 2016 election. And all of that is valid and legitimate. Let me ask you this. Divya's work includes trying to facilitate uncomfortable conversations. And I want to ask each of you, if you were in a private room right now with friends, with people you trusted, to the extent you can actually inhabit that mind space, even though you're with 200 strangers, what would you confess or what would you profess is the most difficult thing we must confront if we are to become the society, the America, the world that you feel we need to be? Like, put your finger on the one or two issues and speak as frankly as you can. Let's go much more specific than social justice, police violence. Let's get to, like, what is the uncomfortable stuff that needs to be said?
For me, some uncomfortable things that would be addressed. For starters, Palo Alto and schools in Palo Alto are absolutely not diverse, and Black students and other minority students are at a minimum. And Black students are definitely dealing with systemic racism from teachers. And from experience, there are teachers at Gunn High School who think it's okay to call their students the N-word or belittle them and humiliate them in front of the classroom based on their skin color. That has happened numerous times to me. That has happened numerous times to fellow Black students that I went to school with. And I think it's important for everybody to understand that as the Black community, going to school with a group of people who don't look like us, who don't talk like us, being comfortable in an academic setting where we are a minimum, it is definitely a lot harder to achieve at the standards of Palo Alto. Because for a lot of us, we can't afford the tutors, we can't afford the prep classes, we can't afford the fancy SAT, ACT courses. So we're trying to catch up in this game that Palo Alto has kind of been stuck in this whole wave ever since the very beginning.
Thank you for sharing that, Cleo. And before anybody goes on, I want to just say I'm so sorry that that has happened to you in our school district. I'm sad, I'm sorry, I'm angry. I'm sure I speak for many, many people on this call and just reflecting that back. I hope anyone on this call who is an educator in the PAUSD, a teacher, an administrator, an aide, an adult of some kind with some authority somehow, somewhere is hearing this. A Black graduate of Gunn has said that Black students get called the N-word and Black students are belittled in the classroom. I know my mother, Julie Lythcott, an avid member of the League of Women Voters, cares very deeply about the experience of Black children in our school district. I know she's listening right now and she's probably in tears or incensed, as we all should be. And so Cleo, thank you for going out on that limb and sharing that very painful truth with us tonight. What are some other difficult things that need to be said?
I think that, as Cleo has pointed out, there is very blatant racism, but there's also racism hiding in the shadows. Like people will have, or a white person will say that I have a Black friend, I'm dating this Black person, so they can't be racist, but that's not true. That's just hiding from, you're trying to make yourself look like you're not racist, if that makes sense. And there are just a lot of little things that we need to change. People need to stop listening to stereotypes and change their ideas of what Black is and pay more attention to the positives. There's every time Black is heard in the media, it's something negative, and I'm tired of hearing that, quite honestly. I think that we just need to change the Black narrative.
Okay, Makayla, thank you for that. What else?
You know, Julie, when the first thing that came to mind when you said that to me was affirmative action. And I think that's really rooted in experiences I've had this summer on social media, where I think people have really, at least teens have really mobilized to take action, whatever, and I guess raise awareness about Black Lives Matter. And a lot of people will be willing to post like police brutality is bad. But then simultaneously, for example, right now, there's a proposition in California about allowing affirmative action in the UC system. And simultaneously, there was a hashtag Asian Lives Matter movement. And I think that's problematic in some ways, in that I think this is a time where, regardless, obviously all people of color matter, but this is a time where Black Lives Matter needs to be in the spotlight for clear reasons. But then you have the same people who are saying police brutality is bad, also saying affirmative action and quota systems are also bad for example, Asians. And I think there's this, I guess there's this balance to have, but that is basically the theory of NIMBY, not in my backyard. It's okay to fight for social justice when it doesn't affect you, but suddenly when your kid can't get into Harvard, it's an issue. So I think there is both things to address in both affirmative action in higher education, but also affirmative action in hiring practices, where we live in, especially in an area that prioritizes a meritocracy, which is important for so many reasons. And sometimes that does not address the inherent inequities that people with different backgrounds experience as they are growing up. And so affirmative action in both higher education and hiring practices, especially in big tech, are conversations we need to seriously have. And not just for the performance of it, not to say, oh, I had diversity training at my Google firm and therefore we are diverse. There needs to be a deeper level of commitment than trying to show something for the case of performance activism.
Okay, Divya, thank you.
I just wanted to refer to what Makayla was talking about. I'm sure you were talking about microaggressions, and that's an uncomfortable conversation that I had to have. I'm biracial, so it's an uncomfortable conversation I've had to have with my non-Black side. You know, being Black in a room full of people who are not Black, and they like to say small things that they don't think are racist. And it's many arguments me and my mother had to have with my non-Black side, because it's, they don't think they're racist. They don't think their words hurt me specifically. And they don't think what they're saying is really hurtful towards me, because it degrades, you know, my Black hair, maybe my skin. But it's like, it's hard to have these conversations with them because they're very, I'd say, closed-minded. And so that's a hard conversation and difficult conversation to have with them, especially the elders, because in traditional ways, elders respect them. You never should say anything to them about their wrong, but it's a difficult conversation to change a culture I feel like is racist. So that's a difficult conversation to have.
One of the things I've been asking lately in response to the murder of George Floyd, when people have asked for my opinion and they've asked me to do a webinar or what have you, the two questions I'm putting to people in the audience are, do you see Black people as fully human? And most people say, well, of course. And I would say, how do you know? What's the evidence in your life that that's true, that you actually see Black people as fully human? For example, some people will say, well, the Black kids are just not as smart in math and science. That's why they're struggling. Well, if you actually believe that, you believe Black people are less capable in math and science, you don't see us as kind of equal humans to everybody else, okay? So that's an example of a view you may have that's really dehumanizing Black people. Instead of being willing to address the system in which Black children are trying to learn and grow, that dehumanizes them, that doesn't see the potential in them, that expects that they are less capable. So my question is, do you see Black people as fully human? This is not for you all, but for people watching, not for the panelists, but for people watching. Do you see Black people as fully human? If so, how do you know? Number two, what are you doing to make this community kinder and safer for Black people? These are questions I would love for folks in the audience to be brave enough to ask yourself, because I think if we're going to make progress on any of these fronts that our panelists have talked about, we have to get to this root issue of, why are people so cruel and unthinking and unkind and demeaning toward and violent toward Black people? And if we can dare to ask those questions in our own hearts, maybe we can start to really address some of those implicit biases that Professor Jennifer Eberhard up the road at Stanford writes about so beautifully in her book, Biased. So I just put that out there for the audience to think about and chew on while I give the panelists a little break there and they're having to be on. Okay, back to you, panelists. What is the one, of all the things you're working on, of which there are many, what is the one thing you're most excited about right now? You're involved, you're leading, you're working, you're joining, whatever it is. Like, tell us project in your life, or if it's not a project, the issue that is most captivating your spirit, and what is it, and where are you in it, and what are you learning from this activism? What is surprising you, or what's an important learning that's happening for you as you make your way forward with respect to whatever this topic is?
Well, as I mentioned briefly, I've been working with a project called the Big Homie Project, where a Black student is partnered with a Black mentor in their field of interest. And my whole thing, like, I think that representation matters so much. Like, as a child, especially, children are very impressionable, and what they see in the media, what they view around them is going to shape their whole world, essentially. And when I was growing up, I really wanted to be an actress. And during that time, there wasn't a lot of little Black actresses. On Disney Channel, for example, there would be one Black character thrown in there here and there, but never a big part of media, if that makes sense. And so I think that that's what makes me most excited. I see a lot more Black representation now, especially like darker Black skin. Colorism is very much a thing, very much still alive, but I think that we're starting to see more dark protagonists, which I really appreciate. So yeah, I think that that's what makes me most excited, just seeing that there's more representation, not just in the Black field, but just in general, all in all aspects.
And Makayla, tell us specifically what Big Homie Project does again. Just give us a reminder.
Yeah, so we take Black kids in the community, Boys and Girls Club, Palo Alto, East Palo Alto, and we find a Black mentor from Stanford, from wherever in their field of interest, if they want to be a doctor, if they want to be an athlete, and partner them and make that connection so they see someone like them doing what they want to do and push them to go further and make their dream come true.
So any Black adult watching, you just heard that, right? There's this project, the Big Homie Project, through the Boys and Girls Club of East Palo Alto and Palo Alto, through which you can mentor Black youth. So if that's kind of stirring in you, is like, ooh, I want to do that. Let's follow up with you after that to make sure we connect you so that you can engage in that way. Okay, what else? Who wants to go with what they're working on, what they're most, I don't know, excited about, or what's juiciest right now around activism and what you're learning from it?
I guess I'll go next. So as mentioned before, I will be attending North Carolina Central University, which is an HBCU, and which is a historically Black college / university. So the student population is majority Black, which has been a goal of mine ever since middle school. And what Makayla was talking about in regards to representation, um, there's a lot of people who still are thinking that Blacks don't have the highest IQs, Blacks don't care about education, the college dropout, when there's a list of schools where the student population is over 10,000 and they're 90% Black. So to be a part of something that debunks so many people's ideas, I don't know, it just makes me feel good because I get to contribute in pursuing my education with people who look like me, people who talk like me, people who have similar backgrounds as me. And again, coming out of Gunn High School and Dean's Community College, where the racial demographic is very similar, stepping out and away from being the minority to being within the majority is something that I've never experienced before. And the HBCUs are underfunded. And there have been a few HBCUs that have had to close due to them not being able to get the money that they need to stay open. So for me to attend an HBCU, I, just like thousands of other Black students across America, across the world, having the opportunity to attend an HBCU for me feels like a once in a lifetime experience. And I think it's important for Black families to definitely consider an HBCU. Not only, going to school with Black kids, but out of like the big HBCUs like Howard, Clark, Spelman, Morehouse, majority of HBCUs accept students who are below average. And I happen to be one of those students. Graduating from Gunn High School, being rejected from all the colleges I applied to again being a below average student at De Anza, applying to HBCUs and being accepted into like 6 of them was mind blowing. And so I think keeping HBCUs in the back of your mind is always a good idea.
Thank you for that, Cleo. Who else wants to answer this?
Can you repeat your question one more time?
Yes. What are you working on right now? Of all the things you're working on, what is most exciting to you and what are you learning from it?
Right now I'm not working on a specific campaign, but I have came across a book that I found very interesting. It's called The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. And it speaks about how the new Jim Crow is the criminal justice system and how Black men are targeted in America, and how that sends them down a pipeline where they'll never be free in America, never build generational wealth, never get a good job, never have their own business and things like that. And I've actually been, right now I'm in my, my father is an example of that book. And I've been, what does it mean? What is, when you examine, I guess, or watch how I hear him talk to me about his child experiences, how he was raised. And he's really my, I don't want to say science experiment because I hate that word, but he's my example of the book. He's who she's talking about. And so when people ask me, or when people want to make excuses like that's not true, Black people have equal opportunities to get rich, to they're just lazy, I don't see that. I actually see, and I see the proof that this is what happens, coming from East Palo Alto, watching my dad, that there is a new Jim Crow, the criminal justice system. And I really want to get into the criminal justice reform. So I'm never excited about activism because I'm mad I have to be an activist. But yeah, that's something that I look forward to fighting.
Nice. Thank you, Ine. Divya?
Yeah, I guess it's my turn then. I think there are two big issues that have been really frustrating me recently. And the first one is that I don't think our national conversations are very productive. And I think that they're often hindered by a growing political polarization, especially with lawmakers, that's preventing a really effective legislation that should be moderate from being passed. And number two, I feel like we have a lot of youth energy and activism, which is so important. And for a variety of reasons, it's not being translated into a high youth voter turnout rate. And so the two ways that I feel like I'm energized to work with that is through Real Talk, which my classmate Eliza Goler and I've been really excited to work with her with this, have been trying to figure out how do you bridge the divide between classroom learning and people actually getting out in civic engagement and voting. And I think what I've found is that, one, you got to talk about the interests, the topics that people find interesting. So right now, that's giving people lessons on Black Lives Matter. It's the criminal justice system. It's figuring out what is going to get teens to vote. It's climate change as well. And then the two, there's a lot of logistical barriers to voting. And I think that a lot of people support voter pre-registration and registration, which is so important. But then there's a step after that, where it's how do you actually get to the voting booth? And a lot of states have adopted really challenging both voter ID laws that prevent youth from logistically just being able to come to the polls. Specifically, a lot of youth who are now in college and now are figuring out, like, how do I vote out of state? And so I've really been excited to work with Real Talk with a group of really excited chapter members at a lot of schools in this area to figure out how do we start having the national conversations as youth that I feel like a lot of our policy makers are lacking, and how do we do it without the constraining nature of political party identities? And then number two, how do we get youth really excited about voting, and then also passing that just logistical barrier of how do you even vote? I think that's how we can create institutional change that makes our activism worth it.
Awesome. All right. We're ready to turn things over to you, our audience. We'd love to hear the questions that are on your mind. I think either Bill or Maura or both are going to be posing these questions to us, so let's do it.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks, panelists. This was really enlightening. We've gotten a lot of questions about schools and how to make, what would equity in schools look like to you, especially at the elementary and secondary? How can we get students engaged? What would you say to teachers? So if you could look back at your life in Palo Alto schools, what would equity look like?
Can you repeat that, please?
Sure. What would you say to a middle schooler if you'd like them to get involved in helping create change?
Okay, so I went on a trip where especially as a Black person, it really touched my soul. I went on a trip. It was Sojourn to the Past, and I really got to track the steps of the civil rights movement. And I feel like that hands-on experience, talking to the people such as John Lewis, rest in peace. I was actually the last trip that I got to speak to him, and he was actually one of my favorite speakers that actually touched the inner activist in me for Black people. And so I feel like that exposure to those type of people and that education on that civil rights movement, it really helped me become more it made me want to fight harder. And I feel like if middle schoolers and people like that, young people like that, if they can go on trips like this and actually trace the steps of how they got here today, I feel like they'd be more, I feel like appreciative and ready to fight for their future.
I think I would say two things to a middle schooler. The first would be, don't be afraid to start something new. And the second, don't be afraid to speak up. This past year, I started a step team at my school as a part of the Black Scholars United, and it got more Black people interested in wanting to join, and we were able to perform at basketball games and in other community events around the area. And I think that kind of got us more wanting to be involved with the community, wanting to show our faces more and things like that. And then also with speaking up and not afraid to use your voice, I think that we all have a platform and we all have ideas to share, and we can influence the people around us in our circle. And it's not that hard to be like, hey, don't use the N-word. Hey, that's not cool to say, something like that. And I think we just need to be more aware of our surroundings and not afraid to speak up. And then the last thing I just wanted to say real quick, I forgot to mention this before. I didn't start the Big Homie Project. It was started by a woman named Jacqueline Diab. I hope that she's watching. I think she is. But I just wanted to give credit where it's due. And if you wanted to look at the website, it's just bighomieproject.com.
Okay, another question. What can we do to support you all? You are all amazing.
So I quickly want to go back to the last question, and I want to state the obvious and say I'm not Black, but I do actually have a question for the rest of the panelists, and that is, for your non-Black peers at school, what role do we have to play? And I think there's a balance in that. I've seen some of my Black peers have to be their own spokesperson a lot of the time, as being quote unquote like the token Black person in the class. And I think that is something that the non-Black peers kind of have a responsibility, I feel, in combating. And so what advice do you have to us?
I actually think it's more important for our non-Black peers to speak up about things, because when Black people do it, it's like we're being the loud, angry Black person. And so I think that it's almost more meaningful if someone non-Black says it, if that makes sense. It comes across better.
My junior year is my first year I actually went to school with, I guess, white people. And I took an accelerated English, and I feel like the problem is that you see me as my race instead of another student. And I feel like, why do you have to ask the question of, just like, why do you have to point out that I'm like Black maybe? And because I feel like in class. I was the only Black person, and I felt like everyone seen that I was Black and kind of like did not talk to me. I was scared a lot of times to ask for help. It was accelerated English. It was very hard. I felt like everyone tried to ignore me and avoid me when I was working in partners. So it's like hard. It's like, sorry, I don't mean to cry, but like, it's hard being like an outcast, I guess. And it's like, I don't know, I don't care about talking to people, but it's like hard when you're seen as a Black person in the class and like, oh, you shouldn't talk to them because like they're different or something like that. So yeah.
I want to just step in here. Ine, I'm holding you across these internet lines we're meeting each other on. The little Black girl in me, and I'm this light-skinned Black kid. What I've dealt with is nothing compared to darker-skinned Black folks, but I have had that experience in an all-white school, and my heart is right there with you, holding you. It's awful. It's awful to feel ostracized and judged. It's awful to feel that if you ask for help, they think Black people aren't smart because you had a question. I mean, there is so much put on the shoulders of young Black folk in this nation because of the stereotypes, because of the bigotry and bias against us. And just look, you have this amazing young woman who is smart and poised and put together with this amazing background behind her on Zoom. And yet she's sharing with you an experience of how marginalized she felt in a classroom up the street. And she's not the only one. I guess it's happened to every Black student in Palo Alto and East Palo Alto, and depending on the school, Menlo Park and so on, everywhere. So, thank you for being brave and sharing that and for being vulnerable. We see you.
Yeah, I just want to say, Ine, you're definitely not alone. I also went through the same thing. It was definitely hard to make friends and know who's really my friend and who wasn't.
Yeah, I feel like it's not more of like I want to talk to people. It's more of like it was my first year being like at school with like white students, and I guess I argue with my mom about this too. I wanted to experience it because I'll run into the world, and I guess it was just different because it's not that I wanted to talk to people. I felt like alone, that my teacher wasn't giving me that guidance either. So that's kind of what I felt like, and nobody could see it, and nobody could really understand why. Like the class probably particularly hard for me. I didn't want to go into like after hours, school hours, because it was like, if you don't talk to me in class, then why would I go after school? Yeah, it was just confusing.
Maura asked a question right at the top of the questions. She asked something about what would equity in schools look like? And then we went to another question on what would you say to a middle schooler? And it may be that my internet was bad, but I don't think I heard any answers to the question about what would equity in schools look like? And the fact is that teachers being problematic, not creating a classroom that fosters safety, equality, inclusivity for Black kids. I've heard that twice now, once from Cleo and once from Ine. Maybe Makayla, you've alluded to it. What would you say if the superintendent of every school district was watching and you were able to say, like, this is what the teachers need to learn, this is what they need to do, this is what they need to not do? What are some things that come to mind?
For me, I remember my junior year of high school. Our teacher was teaching us about the stop and frisk law in Arizona and overall weaving into those uncomfortable conversations. And in doing so, he came off as very racial. Um, um, he physically pointed out all of the students that would have been stopped because of the stop and frisk law. So he was pointing at all the Black kids, he was pointing at all the Hispanics, at all of the darker skin toned students. And, I made a big deal about it. And so when I got called in to talk about it, the head of the like history department was like, well, we have to talk about these uncomfortable topics. And I had to stop her. I was like, you as a non-Black individual in the position of an educator should know how to have those uncomfortable conversations with your students of color without coming off as a racist. You can't be in a position where you are supposed to be teaching students of different races and ethnicities, and then in doing so, you, I guess, put all of the minorities in a corner, because we all know that if it was the other way around, the school would have been up in arms about it. So teachers having those uncomfortable topics and those uncomfortable conversations and those lessons within their classroom, they need to do it in a way that isn't racist, basically.
Anyone else? Can anyone point to a teacher that did manage to have these difficult conversations about something happening in current events or history or literature around race? Is there a teacher that managed to do it well? Does anyone have an example that is an example of it going right, that other people listening might say, okay, that we need more of that in the classroom? Or were there no positive examples? I don't want to presume there were, but maybe there were.
I do have one teacher. My point was going to be we need Black teachers and teachers that are not white in most classes. But I feel like one thing that I do want to point out about Oxford A Academy, that's the school I went to for my freshman and sophomore years, is that their staff were diverse. And I had this one English teacher, shout out to Miss Bennett. She's my mentor now, even though I moved schools, but she's always been very transparent with me, and she's shared her experiences, and it really connected with me. And she's, I hate English, and she's like, whatever the highest thing in English is. And like, she really got me to actually read, like the book I was telling you earlier about. I wrote a whole book report on that, and she's helped me do that. And I think she was kind of like my motivation to take accelerated English. And yeah, it was very different without her teaching me, because I'm going to a white male that's teaching me a harder English, and I don't have that extra support that Miss Bennett really gave me. And so it was, I think I understood me. Yeah.
Okay. Maura, back to you.
Okay, great. We're getting a lot of, I see you, thank you so much, you're all amazing. So thank you for sharing and taking this time to be with us here. I'll go back to the previous question. Lots of people are asking what they can do, what kind of action, is it money, is it support, how can they support you in the work that you're doing?
I think the biggest thing I took away from the few different rallies that I went to, there was a speaker there, and I forget what her name is, but she really was advocating that we need to hire more Black workers and people in power. And I think if you are in a position where you can hire people, hiring Black people would make a huge difference, whether that be in corporate positions or teachers or whatever it may be. I think hiring people, Black people in positions of power can make a huge difference.
What else? What's your call to action for what people need to do? What can they do when they get up tomorrow If they want to make a difference, what can they do? What would you tell them they should do, they could do? What's easy? What's the easy thing they could do? What's the brave thing that they can do?
Okay, I think I have an answer for both, easy and brave. And I think something that I've made my personal goal for this year is publicly admitting when I'm wrong and apologizing. And I think it's a simple thing that doesn't cost a lot of money. And when I've seen it being done, I think it's extremely effective. And I think we live in a culture where when people do make mistakes, I think that is inevitable. People either want to hide from it, get defensive, or talk around it. And I think we need to get to the point where if we have the purpose of creating curriculums and conversations that are anti-racist, there is the possibility that people are going to be making mistakes. And one, we need to be receptive to people calling us out on that. And two, set the expectation that that's going to happen and that we need to publicly admit that. And so I personally am making a call to, when I do things wrong, I want people to call me out on it. And I want to be able to publicly say and admit, I have done these things in the past that are wrong, and this is why I know that they are wrong, and I need to move on from that. I have said this in the classroom setting, and that is not okay. And I think when we normalize people admitting when they are wrong, we can start to create a conversation that's really productive and start to change people's mindsets, rather than a system where I think that too often, when the very few times people are called out, they get very defensive and then nothing happens.
Can you repeat the question?
The question is, what can people do if they want to do something to make a difference around these issues that you're talking about, Hele'ine? What can they wake up? What would you tell them if they said, Hele'ine, I want to help? What should I do differently? What would you tell them they could do starting tomorrow or next week? Like, what's your call to action, we might call it?
I feel like during like my high school years, what I really went to and what really helped me build my character and activism has been the community organizations. I'd say support those, such as like Yuka, I was at Anamatangi Polynesian Voices, One East Palo Alto, SCP. I feel like those actually help youth like me and youth in the community really find who they want to be. And I feel that in a sense it helped me get through school as well, because I feel like if Yuka wasn't there when I was going through school, I feel like I'd miss out on a lot of opportunities, and like I wouldn't be like who I am today. So I feel like they have a good role.
So financial support to Yuka and Big Homie Project and One East Palo Alto and other organizations that we've heard mentioned. That's the point you're making. Donate money. Is that what I'm hearing, Hele'ine?
Yeah, and also if you say you're a white teacher and you don't really understand what a black student is feeling, like also going to volunteer maybe at these programs to like sit in and help and really understand, because I know at Yuka we'd have these conversations about like, you know, the racial hierarchy, and I feel like if you really honestly don't know what like Black people go through or what injustices they face, then I feel like volunteering is a good part too.
Okay, so volunteer, donate money. Excellent. I'd add join boards, lend your expertise where you can. Seek to learn, I think I would say.
Board, join the school board.
Join
And the school board meetings.
Okay, run for school board, join the school board in their meetings, participate. All right.
Supporting Black businesses.
Good.
And raising our children to be color brave.
What does that mean, Makayla, raising our children to be color brave?
Well, I feel like when I was growing up, we were, or maybe younger than that, I'm not too sure, but colorblind was really the term, where you don't see color and you treat everybody the same. But color brave, you recognize color and you acknowledge that people are different from you, and you love that and you cherish that, and you yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Because it's a privilege to say you're colorblind. To say you're colorblind, I don't see color, means you live a life where your color does not matter, make a material difference in the quality of your life. For those of us with brown skin, our skin color matters. We don't have the luxury of being colorblind. We need to teach our kids to be color brave, as Makayla has said. I think of it as teaching our kids that humans are different from one another, very different. It's just that none of these differences are bad. None of these differences make one person worse or lesser than the other. We're all different, but the differences are great. They're interesting. And it's just part of being human. All right, Maura, got another one?
Yeah, we have a couple of people who raised their hands. Bill, did you want to do that, or did you want me to?
Sure, I'll be happy to do that.
Looks like.
Let me open up Sherry Morrison's mic. Sherry, are you there with a question?
Yeah, hi. First of all, I'm very grateful to all of you for sharing all of this information and yourselves. My question is, can you tell us how to have the hard conversations? How do you start them? What do you say? And how do you reach out to people who have different views than you do to have the hard conversations?
So Sherry, before we go to the answers on that, and I know Divya is going to be very interested in that because of her nonprofit, maybe the others, be more specific. What's the hard conversation? You haven't said what your race is, for example, which, by the way, not to put Sherry on the spot, but if Sherry is a white person and has not said, I'm white, and that's an example that as people of color, we feel we've got to say, well, I'm Black and I'm Latino and, right? But white folks we assume whiteness is normal. So we don't have to say, I'm white, I need to have a tough conversation. So Sherry, tell us ethnically and racially what you are, and then tell us specifically an example of a hard conversation you'd like to start.
Okay, I am white and Jewish. And that's important to me, not the white, but the Jewish. Because we experience discrimination, but we can hide. And Black and Latinos and others can't do anything to not be who they are. And so in terms of a hard conversations like politically with Trump supporters, I am not a Trump supporter. I happen to value democracy. I happen to think that there are things that we can be doing, that we should be doing to get the vote out. You know, there are people who do not believe those things. So how do I find people, because I live in a bubble, how do I find people who have those beliefs? How do I engage them in a productive conversation, not in fighting with each other and yelling at each other, but actually finding a way to actually talk to each other in a way that we come away respecting each other as human beings, but maybe actually hearing what each other has to say. Is that specific enough?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. I know you want to jump in here. Oh, Ine's going to say something. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I have no correct answer. A lot of the uncomfortable conversations I've had about race, racism is stupid, and people who are racist are stupid. So they're not really listening to what you're saying because they're closed-minded and they're racist. So it's very hard for me to speak to racist people and tell them that what they're saying is racist because they don't know it. Like, I feel like they don't know it's racist. So it's a sickness. And
I want to challenge that, because I think that there are a lot of people who are racist and don't realize that they're racist. They have no idea that the way they think, that there's something that's wrong about it in terms of how they're looking at other people. So I'm not talking about people who are blatantly, I hate Blacks. We're talking about people where it's very subtle, and they will say, I'm not a racist, but then they behave or they say things that will show you. And you guys talked about that, right?
Yeah, I've had those
So they're not necessarily stupid.
Yeah, I've had those encounters and it's never changed. They still believe in what they're saying. Even if I challenge it, they still do it. They say it's nothing wrong with what they're saying. And so that's my experience as a person who's been in my family, who's been told, like, if they say something, they'll say something like, if I say their braids are cultural appropriation, and they'll say something like, we've been doing this for a heck long, Black people will copy this, and we'll just have long conversations about it. And I'll tell them, I'm not saying that you haven't done it. I'm just saying you say specific, like you say racist things and you try to do that. And it's just, what I'm saying is, yes, people sometimes don't know what they're saying is racist, but what I'm saying is the encounters I came into with, like I've tried to explain and they still don't get it. And you can try to explain, but at the end of the day, I feel like I tried and they're still racist. They're still gonna look at me as inferior.
So thank you for that, Ine. Divya, this is what your organization works on, so maybe you have some guidance here.
Well, yeah, well, Ms. Morrison, Ine, I think the tension that you guys are bringing up is the fact that I think we come into a lot of conversations with the idea that there's going to be some type of resolution. And to be frank, usually that's never the case. When you come into a conversation where people blatantly disagree, there's often not going to be a clear resolution. People often will not even change their minds. And I think that we have to start getting to the point where the point of the conversation isn't to change someone's mind, but it's to listen to understand the perspective beyond the point. And I think Ine brings up in a good point in that when we're talking about political discourse, is there inherently a part of that should not even be allowed? Are there certain statements that are so offensive to someone's identity that shouldn't even be considered part of what we are saying is like discourse and conversation? And I think that's a separate conversation to be had. But in terms of strategies to having these conversations, I'm going to do a shameless plug for Real Talk. If you check out learnrealtalk.org, you can find an acronym that we've been encouraging classrooms. If you're at a firm, I'd encourage you for any conversation you're using to use that as well. And I'm not going to say, it's basically the letters Real Talk and different phrases after that. I'm not going to say all of them, but the two that stand out to me, at least, are number one, for E, it's embrace discomfort. And so when you come into the conversation, acknowledge that it's going to be uncomfortable and be okay with that. And number two, it's know yourself. Me personally, I'm going to come into every conversation I have. I'm going to know that I have a certain lens, having grown up in Palo Alto, having gone to a private school, but also being a woman of color, and coming into a question doing that. And so I think the best thing that we can do when we have the type of conversations is to come in with the intent to listen rather than listening to respond. I think that's when people really mess up conversations. It's when they come in to listen to create a point and to change someone's mind. And I think if we start listening to understand the why beyond someone's perspective, we come across with a lot more from the conversation, even if there's no essential resolution created.
Julie, I'm going to jump in for another question if that's okay with you.
Yep, and then I have one final question for the panelists.
Okay, Don Cox, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so thank you so much. So my name is Don Cox. I'm a former PAUSD principal. I was a principal at Hoover Elementary, and then also principal at JLS Middle School. Hi, Cleo. I wish I was there. I wish I was your principal when I was there. Sorry, I missed you. I retired in 2010 and then went to work at the university level. Okay, so what I want to say is, and then I have a question. I'm so sorry that that many, if not all of you kids have experienced systemic racism within PAUSD. I'm really angry right now, and at the same time also very, very sad. Those racist teachers that you experienced should be fired. Let me just throw that out. I'm really proud of each of you and humbled by your experiences. Please know that I'm working hard now at the university level, training teachers who will teach and love you with respect and equality. What else can I do? This is a similar question to some other folks. I feel like I'm doing quite a bit, but I feel like I need to do a lot more. So what can I do as a white man of privilege who has some influence in my community?
Well, I'll wade in here while our panelists think over this large question. Thank you, Don, for your testimony. Someone said earlier, I think it might have been Makayla, that it's helpful when it's not the Black people who have to speak up and call stuff out in the classroom or in the workplace. So we need all of our allies or accomplices, people who are willing to go beyond ally. We need you to be brave. We need you to step up, be courageous, and dare to call stuff out. The jokes, the misinformed opinions, the outright racism. We need you to say, this offends me, or I'd like to talk with you about this some more. Take it on. We're talking about educating people as well as changing their hearts. And we need your testimony. We need your language, your advocacy. And it requires guts. It's not easy. If it was easy, y'all would have done it by now. But white people talking with white people. As Divya said, she's talking to elders in the South Asian community about anti-Blackness. South Asians talking to South Asians, white folks talking to white folks. You are the most likely to influence people like you. So we need you to take it on. Now, do any of the panelists want to say anything else back to Don Cox?
Thank you, Julia. I also wanted to add that we need more color in the curriculum. I think that students learn best when they learn things about them. I think that we can learn, and like from history, for example, I think that there's so many things left out of our history textbooks, out of our history curriculum, that can be added and just as well get across all of the things that we're supposed to be learning with more color.
I agree with Divya. I think you said it. I agree with you with the curriculum. I know someone was, I just heard it swiftly, like it went through the ear and the other, but it was about, I think it was like European studies, but I didn't start at MA my freshman year, but I think there's like a European ethnic studies or something you have to do. And I know there was a like a student, a past student of MA came to try to put in like Africana studies and things like that to replace that. And I feel like supporting things like that, it may not affect you personally, but supporting student movement can be very, it can help students a lot. We have an answer to like, I don't know how to word it, but I just want to say thank you for, can you hear me? My internet's unstable. Okay, sorry. But I just want to say thank you for realizing like the power you have at the table. But yeah.
All right. I'm going to pose the final question. We are a little over time. We appreciate those of you who are sticking with us. We have one more question to wrap this up and then send you on your way. The question is this for the panelists. Are you feeling optimistic or pessimistic about seeing real positive racial change in your lifetime? In light of the experiences of yourself, your family, your friends, are you feeling optimistic or pessimistic about seeing real positive racial change in your lifetime, and why?
I'm feeling optimistic in my lifetime, pessimistic to it happening as fast as I want it to. I think that as a generation, there's so many of us that are already being color brave and are already having those difficult conversations and speaking out and doing X, Y, and Z other things. But I think that the stubbornness of people who may be blatantly racist or have racist biases is slowing down that process. But I think in the long run, I see change happening.
For me, honestly, in my lifetime, I am pessimistic. You know, of course, we are seeing change, and we are seeing people beginning to shift the way they think. And we are seeing people who are beginning to understand what's happening all around the world. But I feel like there's still a majority of people who refuse to acknowledge the fact that racism, sexism, um, all of these things still exist. And when you have people in power, like our current president, who are able to brainwash billions of people into thinking that wrong is right, then I feel like change isn't really happening where it's supposed to be. And I feel like because racism is one of those things that is being passed down and it's being taught, um, the more you are being taught those things and the older you get, the harder it is to unlearn those certain things. And when you have grown men running around in the streets calling people the N-word or trying to humiliate women for no reason, I just feel like at this point it's like we're just in a never-ending circle.
I agree with Cleo. Sorry, I'll get it right. I am feeling very pessimistic as well. You know, I feel like in the past couple of months is when really injustice was just being broadcasted. It was kind of a trend, but I still feel like there's a lot of work and education that needs to go through the youth because, like I said, a lot of people are closed-minded and their beliefs are their beliefs. And I feel like it's going to take a lot to learn diversity, equity, and things like that. So I'm feeling very pessimistic.
I feel like this is a hard question. So I feel like I'm not feeling optimistic or pessimistic. So I'm going to do a cop out and choose option C. I'm feeling motivated. And honestly, being on the panel with you, Ine, Makayla, and Cleo, that really motivates me. And I'm going to do a call out to all my non-Black fellow people of color and saying that we need to start having more conversations like this within our own communities. And I think that we're often kind of kept out of the white versus Black talk, and there honestly is a lot of anti-racism harbored in those communities that we just don't talk about. Talking to the South Asian community and seniors was quite frankly very scary and uncomfortable for me, talking to my grandparents' generation. But I think it's the type of work that needs to be happened, and specifically for youth, I think we have a unique identity in being able to bring up those conversations and really shed light. And so I'm really pleading with other non-Black people of color to keep on having those conversations, even though it is scary, because even though it may not feel like it, it is also our responsibility. And after this, I'm feeling very motivated to keep doing that. So thank you guys.
All right, I think that's gonna have to end it because we are 8 minutes after our promised end time. I wanna thank the panelists for their insight, for their wisdom, and for their heart and of course for their activism. The one thing I think we must all do tomorrow, if we haven't already done it, is register to vote. We have what for most of us will be the most important election of our lifetimes coming up in less than 3 months. Make sure you are registered and then make sure you vote. If you are eligible to vote, do not sit this out. Not this year, not ever. Vote in honor of these young people who are saying America could be a better place. California could be a better place. Palo Alto could be a better place. You owe it to our young people to try to usher in a better situation. Young people, y'all got to vote too. Okay, don't sit this out. All right, and with that, I want to just thank Bill and Maura for having this. We'll turn it back over to you to officially end the program. Thanks, everybody.
Well, I just want to thank all of you. This was a very inspiring panel in spite of some of the pessimism that got expressed here tonight. I'll send you the comments and questions that were asked to the panel, but I want you to know that there were a number of teachers and educators that reacted to some of the things you said about teaching, and especially in the Palo Alto School District. You've got a lot of supporters out there for dealing with these problems, and a lot of people that were inspired by what was said tonight. And Julie, thank you so much. I know that you're very busy with getting your third book ready for publishing, and so a little plug to you for that. Your turn.
How to be an adult.
How to be an adult. Don't have my glasses on. And Maura, thank you so much to YCS for everything that you do in the community. So with that, we're going to say goodnight and thank you all for being here and taking those important next steps when you wake up tomorrow or next week to make this a better place. Thank you.